Thank you, Brent, and thanks to my classmates who nominated me to be your speaker this morning. I think you can tell from the way we came in that we're a class that has not yet lost its sense of humor in terms of our processional anthem. I don't think I really deserve this honor, but I also have arthritis and I don't deserve that either. I'm also glad I finally made it to Greencastle. I was held up and delayed in Boston taking the ethics exam for municipal officials. Now, this is not about ethics as we learned it at DePauw. This is about ethics for Massachusetts political officials. There's a difference. And I was raised and grew up in Illinois, so I understood. This test was not about the rules, it was about the exceptions. Bribery is wrong, except, and then you get a bunch of, and you have to be quizzed on those. So, as a political scientist, though, and a professional observer of politics, Massachusetts and Illinois cannot top Louisiana when it comes to political corruption. I hope I don't offend anybody from Louisiana, but remember the 1991 gubernatorial election? Edwin Edwards versus David Duke, Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. It created the best political slogan ever. Vote for the crook. It's important. Back in 1965, when we graduated, The Who introduced a song to American audiences called My Generation. And you may recall there was a line there, hope I die before I get old. Well, if you shared that hope and you're still with us today, that hope is gone. We're still alive, and we've gotten older, but we're not old. I mean, old to me is always somebody who's 85 years older than we are, so that's old. And 70 is the new 50. I feel pretty young right now. When I was 40 or about then, I grew this mustache that I have on today, and it turned out to be pure white. And I found that having that white hair gave me a certain gravitas. I could go in and give a lecture, and I was much smarter than I was the day before, just because of this. And as I look out over my classmates, I see a lot of gravitas there today. The mustache also apparently made me look something like John Bolton, the ambassador to the United Nations. When I had more hair and rimless glasses, as in the photo in the program today, it was remarkable how many people would walk up to me and say, are you the ambassador to the UN? I mean, this happened, and my wife will confirm, all over the country. And I would say, well, it happened to me in Washington National Airport last week. But if I got that question, I would generally ask, well, why are you asking? And they would say, well, sometimes they would say, well, I wanted to buy him a drink. So then I'd say, well, yes, I am John Bolton. Looking back over the past 50 years, a couple of things sort of stand out. First, as a big theme, war. Most of us were born in 1942 or 1943, and these were some of the bleakest days of World War II. While we were at DePauw, we were engaged in Vietnam, and shortly after we graduated, the draft began to take a very heavy toll on our graduates. And in the past decade, our children have gone to war. One of the hardest responsibilities I faced as a selectman in Belmont, Massachusetts, was when a police chief interrupted a meeting and asked me, as the chair, to accompany him with officials from the U.S. Army. And our task was to find the father of a young man whom I knew very well, pardon me, who was killed defending his unit in Iraq. Second major theme in our shared history was civil rights for African Americans. In 1964, while we were here, the first Civil Rights Act was passed by Congress. The Selma marches were in 1965. Cities were burning. They're burning again today. There's been some progress, but there is much yet to be done. While at DePauw, I was able to meet key figures in the civil rights movement by virtue of the fact that I was the DePauw representative to summer meetings of the National Student Association starting in my sophomore year. I have no idea why I went there or was selected to be there. But I got the chance to meet a number of interesting people. One was Stokely Carmichael, who was the representative then from Howard University. Stokely Carmichael was a brilliant orator. He later served as president of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee before deciding that nonviolence was not exactly the best strategy. And later still, he moved to Guinea and lived there for the rest of his life. In 1966, while I was at Harvard in graduate school, I was amused to learn that the National Student Association, that included young people like Stokely Carmichael, Barney Frank from Harvard, Lucy Commissar from Queens College, was actually a front for the CIA. Later, I was even more amused to learn that we were in the same league as Gloria Steinem, also funded by the CIA, also being paid to disrupt Soviet-sponsored student organizations. In 1964, in October, I was president of the DePauw Young Democrats, and as I recall, we had about 20 members. David Prosser, who's here in the audience today, currently member of the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, former Speaker of the General Assembly of Wisconsin, was president of the Young Republicans, and he had about 1,000 members. That's an exaggeration, I think, but if you look at your yearbook, there were so many young Republicans that it took 2 photos to cover all of them in a full page. You can look that up. As chairman of the Young Citizens for Lyndon Johnson, I had one of the most humiliating events in my political career. It was October, and I was being asked to host Governor Averell Harriman, former governor of New York, who was going to speak in favor of Lyndon Johnson becoming president. Now, this was an important man, even more important than I perhaps understood at the time. He was the son of the founder of the Union Pacific Railroad. He built his own large shipping company that became the largest in the world in 1930. He was the governor of New York. He founded a Wall Street firm eventually known as Brown Brothers Harriman, and he also served as ambassador at large from FDR to LBJ, from work with Stalin to help settle the Vietnam War. So Harriman was scheduled to speak on the porch of the Student Union, the porch that is now covered by a building, but there used to be a porch over there. And as I was waiting for his arrival, there were about 20 people in the audience. So I asked Jerry Baird, my roommate, to run back to the Lambda Chi house and find anybody and just bring them down so we could have something like an audience with us. And as he was doing that, I looked up Hannah Street. The Hoover new dining hall was not there. You could look straight over to that corner, and you'd look down Hannah Street. And as I looked down Hannah Street, hundreds of people were coming up, walking up Hannah Street. And they were heading our way. So I explained to the governor, look, there was the football game this afternoon, so that's why our audience hasn't arrived. But they're coming. You can just see them all out there. And then at the corner of Hannah and South College, every single person turned right and went down to the Fiji House for a cookout. So the governor made a few remarks very graciously and then left. After graduating from DePauw, I had the good fortune to marry Sherry Harris. a member of the class of 1966. She was introduced to me by Jill Vance Baroker, a member of the class of 1967, while I was recuperating in the Putnam County Hospital. It's a long story. Anyway, I moved on to Harvard in '65. Sherry and I began married life in 1966 in the Boston area, and we're still there. Over the past 49 years, she and I have raised 3 children and had successful careers in consulting and education. And if my years at DePauw taught me anything, it taught me that I could do a lot of extracurricular activities in addition to my schoolwork. I could be on the radio, I could do the college newspaper, I could be in student senate, I could do a whole bunch of things. So following in that tradition, when we moved into town and somebody asked me if I'd be willing to coach youth basketball and youth soccer, I said, sure. I never played soccer before in my life, but I had an assistant from Switzerland, and that really helped a lot. Anyway, I agreed, and I did that for 13 years, and I got to be known by a lot of people because that's the way you generally meet new people, is through these young sports associations. And then I was invited to work in local government, and I've been doing that for either an elected or appointed positions for 25 years. We have a town meeting form of government. Those of you from New England will understand town meetings. If you've read de Tocqueville's History of the United States and Democracy, you'll know about town meetings. I enjoy them a lot. It basically allows in our town about 400 members, citizens, to opine on all manner of subjects and also pass our budgets. The most divisive issue in our town meeting in the past few years was a proposed bylaw to license cats. It's okay to license Fido, but Fluffy is off limits. In 25 years of local government, I never lost an election. I only ran opposed once. It was generally unopposed. But I did taste defeat in referenda whenever I would seek to increase taxes by referenda, which was the only way to really get anything other than the limited 2.5% increase we're allowed by law. And after failing to convince my fellow citizens to increase taxes to fix our lousy roads, when it failed, I comforted myself with the wisdom of H.L. Mencken, who said, democracy is a theory that the common people know what they want, and we give it to them good and hard. I don't have any closing message, really. I started reading about the careers of my fellow alumni, however, and I began to sense what I should close with. My ideas were reinforced by the discussions I listened to on Thursday. It appears that most of us are devoting ourselves to some form of service to others. Sherry would not have gone to DePauw, would not have gone to college, perhaps, were it not for the Storer Scholarship Program in Muncie, Indiana. If she had not gone to DePauw, she would not have met me at the Putnam County Hospital, as I explained earlier, and other good things would not have happened. Today, Sherry and I are establishing a scholarship program very similar to the Storer Scholarship in Muncie for young people of merit who have otherwise not the means to attend education and get a higher education degree. Bob Holland gave me a very inspiring speech on Thursday about a scholarship program that he has established in the memory of his son. Seems to me that any child who's denied an education because of its cost is a real loss of human capital for our country and the world. So I think the uniting theme here is that members of the class of 1965 have the energy, vision, and now the experience, and we're bringing those qualities to bear in service to others. So the message I derive from this shared experience is, back on graduation day in 1965, we had our whole lives ahead of us. Today, we still have the rest of our lives ahead of us. And now we have the wisdom and the means to make them even more productive. Thank you.